Well, welcome to our session. So excited everyone's here today. Looking forward to sharing this space with you all. The title of our session is Rooted in Play, Building and Adapting Nature Toolkit for Early Learners and Families. Um, and so we'll just start with introductions. Stephanie, I was thinking we might just like also have folks if they want to introduce themselves in the chat too. So if you're wanting to, we'd love to hear from you too. So maybe just share in the chat who you are, where you are, and maybe what your role is or an area where you are interested in applying this to your work potentially this session, and that might become clear as we go along too. Um, yeah, so again, my name is Lindsay Walker. My pronouns are she, her. I work for Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm based out of our headquarters, which is in Olympia, Washington, and my role is statewide. I'm our conservation education coordinator. So I work both within our agency. Our agency is like over 2,000 staff, and so I work within our agency for agency staff that are wanting to do education, conservation education and outreach and helping provide them with resources to engage with students or the community. And then we also support formal and informal educators and incorporating conservation education into their courses or into their um, programs, and we have sort of a bank of activities that we share with educators. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here today. I've really enjoyed getting to work with this toolkit. It's a really great resource that I've shared a lot with educators and used a lot in my work. And I'll pass it on to Stephanie.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Stephanie Bohr, I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Learning Programs and Partnerships at Woodland Park Zoo, which is located right in the city of Seattle. We are a 92-acre zoo, so fairly big as far as kind of green space and property, and we have many, many species from all over the world. And a special thing I think about our zoo, along with the North Carolina Zoo, which I know somebody in the chat is from there, is that we really, when you're here, you feel like you are walking through a forest. That's a big part of our history and our exhibit design is that you are on these kind of wooded paths and trails, very much like all of the outdoor space and public lands that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. And then you encounter a rhino or you encounter lions. So nature access and experiences are really at the heart of what we are doing with wildlife, but also exposing people to the idea of being outside and enjoying spending time outdoors. We have a large education department, about 25 full-time staff. I oversee the learning programs and partnerships department, and that includes 3 different teams. So we have a children and family programs team, a teen and adult programs team, and then a team called the Community Collaborative, and they are really focused on community engagement and program co-design with community partner organizations in South Seattle. So a lot of program development and delivery, as well as community engagement and co-creation work. And that is really at the heart of everything that we do. We also collaborate really closely with our colleagues in guest and volunteer engagement who are responsible for the on-grounds guest experience and all of the learning that happens as part of a zoo visit. And this project that we're sharing about today really stems from that collaboration, as I mentioned in our little intro spiel. I think that's probably it for intros. And yeah, we'll just share more as we go. Okay, so I am going to kick us off with a bit of a reflective activity. So for the next minute, I would love for you to think back to your childhood and recall a time when you felt connected to nature. You're welcome to take notes about that, draw a picture, just close your eyes and try to imagine and feel yourself in that place and time. What you were you doing? Who were you with? What was it about nature that you were encountering in a meaningful way? So let's take about a minute for that reflection and then we'll share out some thoughts. All right. Does anybody have a really fond nature connection memory or recollection that you would like to share with the group? Either in chat or out loud. It's also okay if you want to keep it to yourself.
I'll go ahead and share one.
Oh, thanks, Heather.
So I grew up in a rural Pennsylvania, and my house was right next to this little creek. And so every weekend I would go down and explore in the little creek, grab usually some salamanders, and I'd take them back up at the end of the day. And I'd have Sally the salamander for the weekend with me, and then I'd take her back down to her home and release her again and find her next week and repeat the process every weekend, basically.
Love. Yeah, I think I have some fond childhood memories with salamanders as well. Going hiking in the mountains in North Carolina was a big part of what I like to explore too. Well, I imagine that if we were to pull all of our recollections together, it would span all different kinds of spaces and scales and types of experiences from really small, maybe backyard or window box interactions up through maybe, big family bucket list kind of journeys to a national park or some kind of destination that's a bit more far afield. And for a lot of people, some of these kind of formative core experiences and memories happen at places like zoos. So, this is something that we think about a lot in the zoo and aquarium corner of environmental education is how can we provide spaces and experiences that might provide that early seed of nature connection. And when we think about the types of missions of zoos and aquariums now as conservation organizations, we really are looking to make sure that tie into conservation is more direct and explicit than it might have been in the past. As one example, Woodland Park Zoo's mission statement is to save wildlife and inspire everyone to make conservation a priority in their lives. And by everyone, we truly intend and mean everyone, and that definitely includes the earliest learners and the youngest members of our society. So early learners are defined as birth through age 5. That's kind of in the school ecosystem, what that age group means. And of course, for kids that age, one of the best ways for them to experience anything, nature included, is through play. So Lindsay, if you can do next slide, please. So I want to give a little bit of a primer, kind of some definitions to ground us all in what exactly we mean by nature play. So I think this is one of those things that maybe the term isn't familiar, but the doing of it hopefully is, and definitely for a lot of us that work in the science and conservation education fields. So nature play is simply self-guided interaction or free play with natural objects or natural environments. So the self-guided piece is really key. There might be an instructor or an educator facilitating that learning and providing support and backup, but it really is about a focus on child-led, them holding an object, them being in a nature space, and kind of letting their imagination and their curiosity and interest take the lead. There's a ton of research on the benefits of nature play, including improvement in motor skills, both gross and fine motor skills, creativity, problem solving, empathy, social skills, emotional regulation, academic performance, on and on. Many great benefits for the children themselves, which, of course, as educators, we care about. As conservationists, we also care about the role that nature play can take in forming a positive environmental identity. We know, again, from research that this can in turn lead to caring adults who are willing to take action on behalf of nature and wildlife. So, nature play is an important early way to increase access to nature and increase curiosity and feelings of care and connection, which in turn can translate to those same sentiments in adulthood. We also know, unfortunately, that access to nature is dwindling in a lot of communities and in a lot of different childhoods. And there's a number of reasons behind this. In some cases, it might be individual family decisions about how time is spent, perhaps signing up for a litany of organized sports or classes and just losing the opportunity to have time to play till dusk in the backyard. In other cases, it might be more structural and systemic issues like lack of actual safe green space for families and kiddos to explore. So lots behind that. Next slide, please. So this project hoped to really lift up those benefits of nature play and make sure that we were doing it in a way that was really inclusive. One of the aspects of our nature play spaces and programming here at the zoo was that it was often, not always, but focused on guests who came to Woodland Park Zoo, paid the entry ticket, or had a membership. And we really wanted to make sure that we had nature play opportunities happening beyond our gates and beyond the visitors who were coming to see us every Saturday morning as maybe part of their family routine. So we were really fortunate to be awarded a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS, which is a branch of the federal government. Really important funding that helped us launch this project and supported equitable co-design work with a community partner organization. And in our case, we were so privileged to work with REWA, the Refugee Women's Alliance here in Seattle. And I'll share a bit more about their expertise and their valuable work in a second. But the overall concept of the grant was to unite Woodland Park Zoo's interest and expertise in nature play with REWA's expertise in culturally appropriate and responsive education. And we were hoping, and I think we succeeded, I hope you'll agree, that this kind of final output and product of the grant is something that could be used by lots of different educators and families from many, many different cultures, both here in Seattle and around the globe. Next slide, please. All right, so a bit more about the co-design with REWA. So as I mentioned, they have expertise in bilingual and bicultural curriculum, and this really stems from the fact that this organization is extremely diverse, both in their administrative staff, their teaching staff, as well as the families and kiddos that they serve. They run 3 early learning centers around the city of Seattle, and all of those have families from around Asia and Africa, as well as the Middle East and in many other cultures as well. And a lot of the curriculum and learning is conducted in the languages spoken at home by students. And the teachers also speak in their original language as well. So linguistic fluency and the ability that they have to go back and forth across home and school is really important to how they engage families in learning. And we felt that was a great fit for nature play. We wanted the kids to have access to that experience at school and for the teachers to feel confident and excited using nature play as an instructional strategy. And then we wanted the families to have access to those ideas and supports as well. 2 of the 3 centers are in heavily built environments, meaning not a lot of plants or grass or kind of urban wildlife interactions that were readily available for the students. So this was a great place to really test out the concept of developing activities that would in turn provide those opportunities. Every single activity that's in the toolkit, the final product that you see, was developed with teachers at REWA centers, piloted with their students, evaluated by our evaluation team, and then so on to make them the best they could be. So REWA was absolutely instrumental in every single activity in this guide. And I think the quality and inclusive nature of that really shows thanks to their hard work and expertise that they shared. Next slide, please. All right, so the final product is these cards, and I really do want you to see the cards. So as this hour proceeds, we'll work on getting a good camera view. But we got a lot of design innovations from our friends at REWA. One was the concept of putting them as individual activity cards on a ring instead of a massive binder, because that is bulky and big and heavy and uncomfortable to haul around in the classroom and definitely outdoors where we were hoping the kids would be spending more time. So this innovation with just the cards on a ring is a lot more accessible and practical and portable for teachers. They really stress the importance of organizing by season. This is how a lot of early learning, so daycare and preschool classes, structure their curriculum. So linking all of the activities directly to seasonal tie-ins and themes was really helpful and kind of an innovation for us at the zoo. We weren't structuring our work that way. They also recommended and helped us hone a really simplified activity structure, which we'll get into in a minute, as well as different accommodations and extensions that we could offer for teachers to include. Thanks to the grant funding and WDFW support, we were able to print and offer all of the activities, so the full toolkit in 4 languages, and we chose the languages most spoken in the Seattle area. So that's English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. So this is available as a PDF in all of those. Happy to share in all 4 languages, and it is aligned to early learning standards. Next slide, please. All right, so we are going to do some sample activities with you as we move through the hour, but I just wanted to give you kind of a visual of what the guide looks like inside. Each activity is 2 pages. You can see those 2 pages for one lesson side by side here. Very simple, very digestible, and easy to use. Lots of pictures, which we heard from the REWA teachers was really helpful both for them and for their learners to kind of get a visual of what these activities might look like in practice. So that was a valuable recommendation that we also just think makes it look more fun and compelling as well. And you can see some of the sections that we talked about. There's a beginning, a middle, an end. Sometimes if you work in education, there's a million ways to write a lesson plan, and sometimes they can feel really complicated and overwrought. So really appreciated this central grounding with 3 key areas. You can also see the accommodation section off to the right, and then the do more section at the bottom as a way if kids and teachers really got into something and an activity became a beloved favorite in their classroom, how could they build on that and extend upon it? So, very much rooted in early childhood learning spaces and practices, but as you will see when we do these activities, many ways to share this beyond that birth to 5 and educators working specifically in daycare and preschool settings. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to share some ideas about how this can be scoped out for other audiences and places.
Um, Thanks, Stephanie. And yeah, I'm excited to share a little bit about how we are using some of these activities at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I wanted to start sort of with a grounding in our mission. Our mission at the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife is to preserve, protect, and perpetuate fish, wildlife, and ecosystems while providing sustainable fish and wildlife recreational and commercial opportunities. And this work is grounded in our mission because we know, as Stephanie mentioned, that frequent unstructured play in the outdoors as a child has both cognitive and health benefits, but also can be a catalyst for developing some of those lifelong conservation values that are really important to our work. And so the more kids are getting outside and playing, the more opportunity we have to have adults that care about nature. And so I know like fish and wildlife agencies can be really focused on science and that like hard science about these tools and helping educators to do that is really central to our mission. Um, So our conservation education team, we have a few different things that we do. We connect directly with youth, so we host programs with youth and adults and families. We also engage in natural resource education in schools, whether that is going into schools or supporting educators through some of our resources. I'm getting a message, my internet connection is unstable. So if I cut out, maybe put something in the chat there for me to know. Um, and yeah, so we also support educators in using our tools through teacher trainings. And then we also create and promote education opportunities in our wildlife areas. WDFW manages dozens of wildlife areas across the state. But also beyond just supporting those outdoor education opportunities in the wildlife areas, we're also focused on providing those opportunities in urban centers and on school grounds where meeting youth and meeting families where they are if they can't access one of those areas. So some of the ways that we've applied this toolkit, so as I mentioned, we have a lot of scientists at Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, which is really important to our management. And they have a great deal of subject matter knowledge. And the folks that are doing outreach and education at our agency, we have a few folks that are dedicated outreach education folks with an education background. But most of the people that are doing outreach and education within our agency are maybe scientists who have a passion for education and outreach, or outreach is a portion of their job. And so our role as educators on our staff is to help support those staff in doing hands-on activities, kind of moving from this stand and deliver to engaging activities for youth. And so this toolkit has helped us support staff in providing more hands-on and engaging activities. It's one of my go-tos. A lot of staff are like, I don't know what to do. I'm working with kids and I know a lot about this bird, but how can I do an activity about a bird? And so I end up like recommending a lot of the activities in this toolkit. We also have a large collection of biofacts. So we have like whether that's a um, track imprint or a skull replica or actual pelts and things like that. And so there are several activities that can help staff, both staff and volunteers. We have a volunteer education and outreach team. And sort of the opposite with our volunteers, they may not have the extensive background knowledge on some of these biofacts, but there are tools within this kit that can help them. They may not know everything about this track, but here's an activity that they can do with the track that's engaging and helping students like build those observation skills or play with the items on the table. So we do a lot of tabling events, and so they provide. We want to provide a wide array of engagement opportunities at those table events for all ages. And so if you're doing something that's going to work for like the youngest of the folks that can be coming through, that's inclusive for all of the folks that are going to be coming through. So those activities really focused on younger learners, I find are really great for those tabling events because they can be engaging for a wide range of ages. And then also we're gonna do an activity shortly that you'll see is really engaging for adults as well. We've adapted some of these things for to use with adults and older learners as well. Um, and then empowering educators across Washington. So we get a lot of requests for giving a presentation, and we can't always show up in person. We don't necessarily have the staffing to do that. So we always want to support educators in the best way that we can. So sometimes a lot of what we're doing is providing resources to those educators that empower them to do conservation or outdoor education. And a lot of the resources we've developed are for sort of that K through 12 range. So when I get maybe like an educator that's working with the younger students, this is a toolkit that we often share as a resource to those educators. So that's been really helpful. And then I just wanted to share, I popped the English version of the toolkit into the chat so you can look through some of those activities if you want. But these are some activities that either I recommend a lot or that we've done with students, whether it's part of a program. Just wanted to point out some of our favorites. Some of these really pair well with some of our biofacts that we have in kits for staff to take to events. So you can see this is an activity that goes along with the nature imprints activity. We have a lot of items in our kits to imprint, and this one's using sand instead of clay, but similar exploring with some of those biofacts using the activities. Um, yeah. I did just want to also, this is not a part of this presentation, but I wanted to share some of our resources that we have for older students. If you work with K through 12 educators at all, these are next generation science standards aligned curriculum units that we have as a resource. These are unit plans that are really designed for student mastery on the subject and aligned with the grade standards for each age group. And they're focused on Washington, but all of these units are open source. So we really encourage adaptation for other place-based learning. And they're free and available on our website. So if you have any questions about these or want to connect, I'm happy to my email address will be at the end, and I'm happy to talk more about that as well. And all of these are also available in Spanish. Okay, let's try it out.
All right. So I feel like in an activity book, people ask what's your favorite, and it's like with kids that you're not supposed to have one. But I do have one. This is my favorite. And I personally do this with my own 2-year-old as well as myself. If I'm spending time in nature alone, I find this a very meditative and kind of healing. Focus, attention building exercise, a lot of what we were chatting about in Nancy's keynote earlier. So I think this builds nicely off of how we got our start together this morning in the general portion. So this activity is called Nature Circles. You can kind of follow along again with that beginning, middle, end structure. So this provides information about how you would set it up with learners. I am going to give us about a minute to just look around and collect objects that are in the room. Maybe you just have some tchotchkes on your desk. Maybe you run into the kitchen if you're working from home and grab some utensils or coffee filters. If you are near the outdoors and just want to step outside and grab some nature materials, of course, that is the type of experience that we would do with learners. But the concept here is really to just take very readily accessible objects and to craft them into a shape and a series of shapes that interconnect and relate to one another in a way that feels soothing and pleasing to you. You can do it in any shape. It does not have to be a circle. For many people, and especially for young kids, a great way to start is to ask them to pick one focus object in particular. So I have some nature materials from here at the zoo. And I think the object that I am going to pick is this really interesting rock that we found. It's pretty big. It's about the size of my hand, and it's got kind of pink and silver undertones to it. I am a zoologist, not a rock person. So if anybody can idea it, that's awesome. But for the purposes of nature play in this activity, it is really not about naming everything and necessarily knowing all the facts behind it. It's more just appreciating something's shape, its heft, its colors, its textures, really drawing young learners' attention to that vocabulary and that tactile and sensory learning. So in my case, I'm going to place this in the center of my circle, like the ferns are in this image here. But go ahead and take about a minute and find some objects that you would like to construct a nature circle with. And then we can all maybe share some of the moments that stood out to you in building this art piece. So we'll come back together. It's 11:29. Let's come back together at maybe 11:32, and that gives you some time to gather materials and arrange them. All right, let's take about one more minute to finish up your nature circle. All right, welcome back. I was playing around to see if I could get mine on camera, but I think with the filter, it's too wacky and will all clatter around on my laptop instead. Um, does anybody have a nature circle or nature creation that you would like to share, or any thoughts about how that kind of 3-minute experience was, and if it changed a little bit about how you were kind of moving through your day? One thing I can share is that my materials did not feel like a circle was the best structure or shape for them. So I ended up arraying them in like a diamond shape. So I think that is a great element of nature play activities, is that you can give an instruction and you want to give kids some kind of ideas and suggestions, like we talked about in the general session, that for young brains, structure and routine can be good, but it's also a place for them to experiment with doing something not the way the instructions specifically said, but doing it safely and in a way that they can kind of flex their creativity. I saw Marcus, thank you, in the chat, said satisfying, makes my brain feel good. I agree. I also think it makes my hands feel good, right? Like, especially, again, this is for kids, but we as adults, like, the only thing my hands touch all day is this laptop keyboard, and that is not enriching, or very stimulating in a positive way. So for me, just having the break of touching a rock, touching a pine cone, feeling those differences, I think just triggers how your brain is kind of activating and firing, that a keyboard does not do, at least for me. Heather in the chat said I had limited resources and made me be extra creative in my nature circle. Mine wasn't a circle either. Yeah. If I didn't cheat and have access to the Zoomasium at Woodland Park Zoo, where we have all these great nature materials, like this perfect rock, like, come on, I would have been doing this with like some strawberries in a Tupperware container and some lip balm, and maybe my car keys. So definitely sprung it on y'all without a lot of time to prepare. So of course, if you are facilitating this activity with kids or other audience groups, great way to prepare is just have a bin or a giant bag of different, I mean, truly, it can be leaves that have fallen from the tree in your yard. It could be rocks that you accidentally kick on the sidewalk walking your dog. Really low cost, and does not have to be something super fancy. It does not have to be this, incredibly rare bird feather that's at the center of your nature circle. And in fact, make sure that it's not, because you want to make sure you're complying with all of the laws around wildlife products. Um, One other flag that I will put in the chat, in addition to creating the actual toolkit itself, part of this grant was creating a training that really goes deeper into the goals of nature play, other resources to facilitate and offer nature play, and a lot of additional information around inclusion. And it also has a module around appropriate collecting and gathering and storing of nature materials, because for those of us in the science and environmental education space, we probably picked a lot of that up along the way. But if you're a preschool teacher and this is really your first time dipping a toe into interacting with natural objects to facilitate, it might be helpful to know what should be frozen, perhaps, to rid of any bugs, or what are things that you don't want to pick up, like certain feathers that might be protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So we get a bit more into those nuances in the training. The training is completely free. It has 8 modules, so it's about 8 hours total. You're welcome to pick and choose any ones that are in interest to you. You do have to create a login and a registration to the zoo's online learning portal, but it's totally free. We just need that login to access all of the videos. So I'll plunk that link into the chat if anybody wants to go deeper. But thank you for playing along, and I hope you got a little brain break from just a laptop.
Okay, so our next portion is the discussion and workshop portion of the workshops. We're going to move into that. And we just have a few questions to shape our conversation here. So we can't further break up into breakout rooms in a break once we're already in a breakout room. So we'll just have like a larger group discussion, but the format we kind of want to use for these is the think, pair, share. I guess it won't be the pair portion. So the think and then the share portion of like a think, pair, share, where you think about the question first and take some time to either if you want to write about it or just think through in your mind, and then we'll come back as a group and discuss each question. I'm going to share. Yeah. Just a moment. Okay. Um, so these are the questions that we're going to be discussing. And the first one is, how does nature play connect with maybe your own personal mission or your organization's mission? And this is something that I talked about a little bit with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife and can be a helpful exercise in thinking of how this connects with what you're trying to do as an organization or as an educator. Um, and so we'll start with that. We'll just take maybe like 30 seconds to think through in silence, and then we'll prompt folks who want to chat about it. Okay, I'm gonna toggle back and forth between sharing and not sharing, or maybe I'll just put these questions in the chat so that we can see each other for our discussion. Um, does anyone have thoughts on how nature play connects with whether it's your personal mission or your organizational's mission? I was kind of thinking through my own like personal story, kind of prompted by Stephanie's early question of some some memories of childhood and how those I remember so much more the times where I was playing in nature than like some of the lessons even I learned in school. And so I think just sort of as my personal mission as an outdoor environmental educator of when youth are having fun outside, that's a win, and that's learning is always happening through play too. And so I really love to get to incorporate more play into my teaching whenever I can.
I can share as well more from the personal standpoint because Lindsay and I got to share our organizational missions already. But I think for me, this really kind of came up again in my life during and kind of coming out of the worst parts of the COVID pandemic because I was working in environmental education from my dining room in Chicago at the time and basically did not leave the house or have any kind of experience or playful connection with nature for months and months on end. And I realized like how burnt out I was, and as an educator, how tapped out I was feeling because I had lost that spark myself. And finally, we were able to go for just a walk around our neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it was in April and May, and trees were just starting to bud in Chicago, a little optimistically. But how healing that was, I felt for myself, both personally and then for my ability to do my job. It just reminded me of the importance of play. And I was an adult, didn't have kids at the time, but that kind of playful experience really recentered me. And I want other people to have that, whether they're a little kiddo or not, kids at heart for all of us.
Judy shared in the chat. Oh, go ahead, Tiffany.
Yeah. Yeah, this relates to some of the work that I do. I have an early childhood educators workshop that I host every fall. It's a two-part series, and a lot of these educators work at in-home daycares or daycares, preschools, and we do give them some supplies, but it's the goal is to have these teachers feel that they are equipped to teach science. And so having something so basic as go outside, find some sticks, find some leaves, that's definitely tools that they have at their disposal no matter their funding. A lot of them report that, yeah, we go on nature walks. Then I'm like, guess what? You are doing science. You're being out in nature. You're practicing your counting. You're practicing your colors. That's all part of it.
I teach a graduate level in an online kind of setting. So it's very difficult to kind of bring this element in, but I have tried to do so with an exercise that I have students do every semester where they pick a place in nature near their home where it's safe, because we have obviously individuals who might not be safe by themselves outside alone. But to go to pick a place, to spend time in that place, to do some journaling about it, to find out the history of the place. I love asking them to find out the history of what that place was over time, centuries back, and to learn and write about it. But it always ends up being just sort of one of the standout um, exercises in the course, is just taking that time to just sit in nature and listen quietly. So it's not necessarily play, but it's observational, I guess.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts on that first question, and I'm enjoying reading some of these comments in the chat too. There's a few comments in there too, so thanks for sharing. Um, in light of time, we'll move on to question two, which is what barriers do your staff or constituents face to implementing nature play? Um, and we'll take a minute to think of this as thinking, like being a very science focused institution, I think there can be resistance to playing in general. Like we want to deliver the facts of um, and a lot of times that's not necessarily how we as learners learn, is just by hearing all the facts. So play can be this portal into learning that maybe isn't as heavy on facts, but for different ages of learners is a more appropriate way to engage with our communities. So I think sort of that framing of, but also like just what people are used to and how they're used to teaching and kind of switching that up a little bit. So let's take a couple seconds here to think about maybe some barriers your staff, or constituents face to implementing nature play, and I'll put the question in the chat. Okay, anyone have thoughts on that question?
I thought I could share a barrier. So I'm with the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And while we do have a Discovery Center, which is wonderful and hands-on and all that stuff, one barrier is that we're inside and trying to think about ways to get that sensory body experience when you're staring at a diorama is a challenge. And there's many creative ways I see in your toolkit to use our bodies, or things we can hold, or ways to draw, or things we can observe in a diorama. But just wanted to ask if you've heard from folks who are not able to get outside, how they can adapt these things when they're inside.
Yeah, I can speak to that because the early learning centers at REWA, two of them had kind of a similar structural issue with just having turf grass and then kind of artificial plastic oriented playground toys. So really those teachers, I would say, most heavily used the activities inside. So that became to them like this very intentional activation of bringing the outdoors or bringing nature in. So they really looked at that as kind of an in lieu of experience. And that's where having the tactile materials really came into play. And there aren't hard rules around nature play. Like at the zoo, for example, sometimes we have little plastic, zoo animal toys out that are part of the interaction that kiddos might have alongside the natural materials. I think if you're really in a nature limited space, perhaps being a little bit more strict with yourself of like really, really trying to ground and provide natural materials. So in the context of like a museum exhibit, are there biofacts or are there items related to the animals on display, their habitat, or maybe equipment that might be used to study them, that kind of thing, just to really provide that tactile sense. Depending on what species it is, scent, like scent oils that might be used for hunting and different game stores can be an interesting way to engage kids in a sensory element that is maybe not as easily thought of as something like hearing or touching. So I've seen that be a really engaging way to kind of very in a surprising way immerse kids in something that they might not be thinking about, whether it's a deer or skunk or something like that. So I know some of those oils can be helpful for that piece, but welcome other folks' ideas.
Yeah, it seems like space is a
Mm.
common challenge. Yeah, and I think like bringing in some of those material, we have a lot of biofacts that we use at our table, and I think a table is like a very limited space as well. Sometimes we're tabling outdoor or indoor, but there's a lot you can do with tactile things or observing and or even like having students like just play with the items on the table and t touch a skull or touch a those tactile items, any little nature things that you can bring in, collecting leaves and bringing them in. And I think
You
that's
know,
one of our, oh, sorry.
um, one kind of, I know this depending on like the type of program and structure that you're offering at your informal learning site. But one of the things that I think the Rewa families really resonated with was providing like take home ideas for families. So that may not be applicable just for general visitors, although you could have like a QR code or something like that by the exhibit. But because some of the early learning centers were space limited and couldn't get that outdoor play, they had a family newsletter and family caregiver nights where folks could come and they would model the activity for the families. And then maybe they couldn't do like the full version they might want at the center, but parents could perhaps do that at a nearby park. Seattle is lucky to have a lot of parks. So I know that differs from city to city in particular, but sometimes it's kind of that capacity building and supporting the other folks in the learners' lives to be able to do that even when they're not at your site, but kind of planting that seed that it's something they could do on their own.
Yeah, we met, Stephanie and I also met with some of our local libraries too, who have like kits to check out. And talked about some opportunities to, put some of the cards in with a kit, that families can check out and take home as well. So kind of similar idea to what you were just sharing, Stephanie.
Yeah, libraries, I feel like libraries have a ton of potential as collaborators around this resource. So I think that's a great place to look. And sometimes libraries are located in parks or located in green space, even if your facility doesn't have that as much.
Well, we're running short on time. I'm wondering if we want to just let's see what we have a couple more questions of discussion left, and I know folks may have just like other questions related. Stephanie, do you want to? I think I really like question three. Do you want to just do question three, and then if we have some questions, we can do that next. Okay. Um, Question three is, what opportunities are there where you live with seasonal exploration and nature connection? And I know that's like how this toolkit is divided, if you haven't had a chance to check it out, is into the different seasons. And so, what are some opportunities where you live with seasonal exploration? And we'll just kind of jump into the discussion and I'll put this into the chat.
Something that pops up for me is that I do a program around birds, and birds are very seasonal. So in where I'm at in South Carolina, we have waterfowl in the wintertime. So I'm doing a program on waterfowl in the wintertime and talking about warblers in the spring and summertime, and maybe shorebirds in the spring as they're migrating through. Not necessarily geared specifically to young kids, but it very much in fact, seasonal in the nature of what can be talked about because they're only there for a limited amount of time.
Yeah, I know we worked with there's a library that reached out to us wanting to do some owl programs in the fall. And so we've been sharing some owl resources and there's an owl activity in the Nature Play Toolkit that we shared with them too.
What was your question for? I wasn't able to write it down before.
Yeah, I'll write it down. I don't know if we'll have a chance to discuss it fully, but maybe we can talk about it too here. Either question three or four. That's within your role or organization, what access to tangible nature items do you have available for students or kids to interact with, whether they're biofacts, tree cookies, leaves, or other items. And I'll put that in the chat too. We have like 3 minutes left, so I guess we can also just like open up for questions. If anyone has further questions or thoughts they want to share, I'll put our final slide to um, that has our contact information and also direct folks to during our break if you need some stretches. There is a great stretch activity or kind of like a mindfulness activity, Calm Like a Critter, on page 53 of the toolkit if you need a little break and want to do an activity.
And this is a great one because it's playful, so nature play, but does not require any materials. So if you are looking at an indoor space, but you have a little bit of room for kids or your audience to move their bodies in ways big or small, then this is a great one that is totally independent of materials. And there are a handful like that in the kit, so you can definitely look at ones that are less object heavy.
We've paired this with our reptile kit and with like a suggestion to do like a snake breathing where you breathe in and then so you can kind of have some fun like animal connections too, wildlife connections.
And I've seen a few organizations do animal themed yoga, all the way up from kids through adults. So I can't, I'm blanking on one offhand, but if you Google that, you might be able to find some good examples or videos of different animal postures, either rooted in traditional yoga or kind of in a more playful kid-based way. But this is an idea that I think is getting more popular as more and more early learning spaces are tapping into yoga for that kind of mindfulness and self-soothing and calming structure that it provides.
Well, thank you all so much for attending. It was really great to meet everyone. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or follow up or want to connect. I'd love to stay connected going forward.
Yeah, and happy again to share. I know Lindsay linked, and I'm sure Bunny will include on the conference page the English version. But we, again, just to reiterate, have the toolkit available in Spanish and Mandarin as well as Vietnamese. So if you work with learners or community in that utilize those languages, happy to share those links too. All right. Thanks, everybody.